I still remember the scent of the daisies he brought home, my favorite. I smiled, put them in a vase and told him I loved him, all while knowing what I had hidden in the closet. 9 months of lies, 200 screenshots, and the sickening feeling that I was the perfect pawn in his game. You won't believe the secret I held onto while planning my revenge. The luminescent glow of Stuart's mobile device pierced the dim ambience of our Friday evening cinematic experience, its preview notification hinting at a cetacean subject. My mind immediately swam with perplexity, questioning why his associate, Jackson, would be transmitting messages regarding marine fauna at such a late hour, precisely 9 p.m. I instinctively reached for the apparatus, intending to return it to its rightful owner, as we were engrossed in an exhilarating action film, and Stuart had been anticipating a reply from his compatriot concerning their forthcoming weekend gaming endeavors. Stuart had been contending with a respiratory ailment throughout the entire week, and precisely as my fingers closed around his telephone, he unleashed a particularly forceful paroxysm of coughing, that unpleasant, phlegm-laden expulsion that unequivocally signals an urgent need for intervention. He swiftly retrieved the device from my grasp and virtually sprinted towards the lavatory, driven by the necessity to clear his nasal passages and avoid any unseemly displays in my presence, an act which, to be perfectly candid, I appreciated immensely at that particular juncture, as no one desires to witness such a spectacle. However, here lies the pivotal detail that ignites within me an irrepressible urge to vocalize my despair into the vast emptiness. His singular focus on reaching the lavatory before experiencing a complete sinus eruption caused him to neglect the simple act of securing his phone. The display remained illuminated when a subsequent communication surfaced from the identical group conversation, inquiring, "Is that whale still conversing?" accompanied by a trio of crying with laughter emojis. I remained seated on my settee, the very same settee for which I diligently rendered payments in my domiciliary space. And I accessed that collective chat, propelled by an intrinsic conviction that this discourse pertained to me. And oh, by the divine, was my intuition accurate. This individual had been participating in a group communication with Jackson and 2 other male acquaintances, Josiah and Johnny. And they had been unequivocally and systematically disparaging me. But it wasn't merely their verbal calumny. Stuart had been clandestinely recording my interactions. Actual audio snippets and visual captures, me recounting the events of my professional day, me chuckling at a humorous digital short on TikTok, me serenading my maternal figure, Virginia, with happy birthday via FaceTime in the month of August. And each and every single recording was accompanied by a derogatory caption. "Someone, for the love of all that is sacred, alleviate my existence. This porcine creature will not cease its utterances. For how much longer must I feign genuine interest? She is vocalizing once more. A benevolent soul, please rescue me." I persisted in scrolling, my digits trembling, yet not from sorrow. I was incensed. Jackson dispatched a missive in July, inquiring why Stuart had not yet severed ties with me if I was indeed so vexatious. And Stuart's subsequent rejoinder? I immediately captured a digital image of this particular exchange, understanding its future utility. He articulated, "Her yearning for affection is boundless. It's truly comical. Complimentary sustenance, her luxurious BMW, that residential unit. I am experiencing a life of regal splendor. While she meticulously blueprints our nuptials, accompanied by a casual LOL. This very individual, had been occupying my apartment for a duration of 9 months, entirely without financial obligation, operating my automobile at his whim, consuming provisions I had procured, and apparently harboring an intense disdain for every moment spent in my company, all while his companions egged him on with enthusiastic approbation. There was an additional written communication from September wherein Stuart disclosed that I had procured a PlayStation 5 for his natal day, under the misguided assumption that a matrimonial proposal was imminent. Josiah's retort: "Brother, you are a veritable prodigy. This constitutes the paramount deception ever conceived." And Stuart's reciprocal message: "I concur, do I not?" She even defrayed the expenditures for my fitness club membership because I posited that we ought to collectively pursue a healthier lifestyle prior to our matrimonial ceremony. What matrimonial ceremony? We had, indeed, engaged in discussions regarding the prospect of future matrimony, yet I had never exerted any undue pressure. I merely articulated on a singular occasion that I believed our connection was commendable and that I envisioned a shared future. That was the entirety of the matter. And this individual transmuted that innocent remark into the complete rationalization for his exploitation of me. I retrieved my own personal communication device and commenced capturing photographic evidence of every pertinent detail. Screen after screen, each venomous message, every surreptitious recording, every instance of their derisive laughter regarding my perceived lack of intelligence. My phone's gallery was inundated with sequential screenshots. And I meticulously ensured the capture of dates, the comprehensive dialogues, the entire contextual framework. The lavatory door opened and Stuart re-emerged, his voice betraying a nasal congestion, discoursing on Jackson's inquiry regarding our continued participation in a barbecue gathering at his abode the ensuing weekend. And I offered a radiant smile. I bestowed upon him a cheerful countenance and affirmed, indeed unequivocally, "That sounds delightful." and I inquired if he desired me to prepare my celebrated potato salad, an item perpetually in high demand. He gently pressed his lips against my forehead and resettled beside me on the settee, encircling me with his arm, resuming his absorption in the film as if no anomalous events had transpired. Concurrently, my personal device contained approximately 200 digital captures of him referring to me as a cetacean and a swine, as desperate and intellectually deficient. I found myself utterly incapable of concentrating on the cinematic narrative. My cognitive processes were racing at an accelerated velocity, endeavoring to formulate an appropriate course of action. A segment of my being yearned to confront him vociferously at that precise moment. However, an inner prompting advised me to exercise patience, to approach this situation with strategic acumen, for if he had been engaging in a protracted deception with me, I, too, was capable of playing a similarly extended game. The ensuing morn ushered in Saturday, and Stuart solicited the use of my automobile to rendezvous with Jackson at the fitness facility. Yet I responded, "Certainly, my dear." I extended my keys with a pleasant expression. And the instant he departed, I meticulously scrutinized every single item he had left within my apartment. His portable computer was secured by a password, but his tablet device was not, primarily due to his usage of it for observing athletic events. I accessed his messaging application, and it synchronized with his mobile telephone, revealing an even greater volume of conversations. It became apparent that there existed a distinct communication thread solely between Stuart and Jackson, wherein their discussions regarding me were even more disparaging. Jackson persistently probed about Stuart's timeline for finding a better partner, and Stuart indicated he was delaying until after the festive season, as he anticipated I would procure a plethora of costly presents for him during Christmas. He was orchestrating my utilization through the Christmas period, subsequently intending to discard me. I also discovered auditory memoranda on his tablet device. Recordings he had made of me without my cognizance. Me engaged in a phone conversation with my mother, expressing my contentment with the positive trajectory of Stuart's and my relationship. Me confiding in my confidant Rachel my belief that Stuart might be the one. Me simply existing within the confines of my own domicile. And this individual was documenting these moments to transmit to his associates for their amusement. My entire romantic association was a mere jest to him. 9 months of my existence. I had introduced him to my familial unit. My mother held him in high regard. My father considered him exceptional. We had embarked on a recreational excursion together in July, and I had borne the majority of the expenses, as Stuart asserted that his employment at his uncle's automotive components establishment offered meager remuneration, and he was striving to accumulate savings. I now realize he likely simply wished to avoid expending his own financial resources when mine were readily accessible. He was employed at this modest enterprise, owned by his uncle Richard, undertaking inventory management and assisting patrons. And he consistently portrayed a narrative of financial constraint. However, upon retrospective examination of these communications, he possessed ample monetary resources. He simply evinced a preference for utilizing mine. I transmitted all the digital captures and auditory recordings to my own device via his tablet. Then I expunged the record of sent messages to preclude his awareness. I transferred all the data to my portable computer and created a backup on a portable flash drive. Subsequently, I meticulously returned his tablet device to its original position. Stuart returned home 3 hours later, perspiring and exuding cheerfulness, recounting his physical training session and inquiring about my preferences for our evening meal. I proposed we order from his preferred establishment my treat. He assented without a moment's hesitation. We spent Saturday evening partaking of pasta and engaging in television viewing, and I responded with laughter to his jests and nestled close to him. And throughout the entirety of this period, my thoughts were consumed by those messages, by his characterization of me as a cetacean, by his companions' epithets of pig, by their collective mirth regarding my perceived desperation and intellectual deficiency. On Sunday he inquired if I desired to accompany him to the retail complex, as he required new footwear. I affirmed, and we proceeded there, where I observed him trying on approximately half a dozen distinct pairs of athletic shoes from a prominent brand. He articulated comments regarding which ones presented the most aesthetically pleasing appearance and solicited my judgment, which I duly provided. Then, at the point of sale, he regarded me with an expectant gaze, and I comprehended that he anticipated me to cover the expense of his footwear, as was his customary practice. I retrieved my payment card and procured the shoes for him, incurring a charge of $85. The sales associate inquired if I wished to append the transaction to my loyalty program account, and I assented with an expansive grin. Stuart bore the shopping bag and clasped my hand as we traversed the retail complex, declaring me the preeminent girlfriend imaginable, the most exceptional girlfriend ever, all the while possessing months of communications labeling me a cetacean. On Monday he departed for his employment at the automotive components store, and I feigned illness, reporting myself unwell. I was not, in actuality, indisposed, but I necessitated a period for contemplation, for strategic formulation. For this is what I understood: if I were to merely confront him, he would most likely prevaricate. He would employ psychological manipulation to distort my reality. He would assert that I was misinterpreting the situation or exhibiting irrationality, or that it was merely male banter devoid of genuine malice. However, I possessed irrefutable proof, digital captures, auditory recordings, precise dates, complete contextual information, every pertinent detail. I also recognized that his appellation was absent from my lease agreement. He had gradually established residency over several months, initially frequently staying overnight, then progressively relocating more of his possessions until, fundamentally, he simply resided here. Yet, from a legal standpoint, this apartment was unequivocally mine. The automobile was registered in my name. The furnishings were my personal property. Everything within this abode belonged to me, save for his apparel and that absurd PlayStation 5 I had procured for him. On Tuesday, Stuart proposed that we host his maternal figure, Brenda, for an evening meal on Thursday. He stated that she had expressed a desire to visit our dwelling and to become properly acquainted with me, given our prior encounters had been limited to 2 occasions at familial gatherings. I affirmed, certainly. I would be delighted to prepare a meal for her. He appeared exceedingly pleased by this prospect. He bestowed a kiss upon my countenance and expressed his good fortune in having me. He articulated that his mother would undoubtedly cherish me with the same affection he purportedly held. I offered a pleasant smile and commenced planning the culinary selections. Wednesday evening, Stuart arrived home bearing floral arrangements. He posited that he had merely observed them at the grocery establishment and immediately thought of me. They were daisies, my preferred blossoms. And an intense urge to hurl them at his visage surged within me, but instead I placed them in a decorative vessel and conveyed my gratitude. He then articulated his affection for me. He uttered those very words directly to my face, "I love you, my dear." And I reciprocated the sentiment, for I needed him to maintain the illusion of normalcy, to remain utterly oblivious to his clandestine activities throughout the preceding months. Thursday morning I awoke to find Stuart already engaged in his ablutions, preparing for his professional commitments. His mobile device rested on the bedside table, undergoing recharging. I retrieved it. The group communication contained new transmissions from overnight. Jackson had circulated a digital meme pertaining to exasperating romantic partners. Josiah responded, "Dude, is Stuart still exploiting that cetacean?" And Johnny interjected, "My associate is a true legend, acquiring all that complimentary merchandise." Stuart had replied at 6 a.m. while I still slumbered beside him, "Almost concluded with this journey," accompanied by a casual LOL. "After the holidays I am departing. Already have my sights set on this female from the fitness facility." After the festive season, he was already meticulously arranging his departure and identifying his subsequent target. I captured additional digital images and returned his telephone to its original position. That evening, Brenda arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, and I had meticulously prepared an elaborate and delectable supper: oven-roasted poultry, pureed potatoes, assorted vegetables, and freshly baked bread rolls. I set the table with my finest tableware and ignited scented candles. Brenda entered and immediately commenced bestowing compliments upon every aspect: the apartment, the culinary offerings, my impeccably presented appearance. Stuart exuded an air of profound pride, conducting a tour of the premises as if he had personally contributed to the interior design or defrayed any of the costs. The dinner atmosphere was remarkably peculiar, as I sat there engaging in polite discourse with his maternal figure, all the while cognizant that her offspring considered me a cetacean whom he was actively deceiving. Brenda consistently iterated her profound happiness that Stuart had discovered such a remarkable and well-composed individual. She inquired about prospective matrimonial arrangements, and Stuart dismissed the inquiry with a casual laugh, asserting that we were progressing deliberately, and I simply offered a pleasant smile and affirmed, "When the time is truly opportune it will manifest." Following the meal, Brenda expressed a desire to peruse photographs of us together. I retrieved my mobile device and commenced displaying images from our recent vacation, from various social engagements, from instances of us simply spending leisurely time together. She effusively praised our perceived charm and Stuart's apparent contentment in all the images, and something within me irrevocably fractured. I could no longer sustain the pretense. I could no longer maintain that facade of cheerfulness. However, I also recognized that this was not the opportune moment. Not with his mother present. Not yet. Consequently, I excused myself to the kitchen to retrieve the sweet course. And I stood there for a brief moment, simply regulating my respiration. And upon my return I presented both pastry and frozen dessert, accompanied by another forced smile. Brenda departed around 9 o'clock, declaring that she had experienced a truly marvelous time and that I was an exceptionally valuable partner, and Stuart would be wise not to jeopardize this connection. Stuart escorted her to her automobile, and upon his return indoors he was beaming with delight. He proclaimed that the dinner had unfolded flawlessly, that his mother adored me, that every aspect was progressing swimmingly. I inquired what he meant by progressing, and he responded, "You know, us, our romantic association, our shared destiny, our future." This individual genuinely believed he shared a future with me after the disparaging remarks he had been making. Friday morning, Stuart departed for the automotive components establishment early, as his Uncle Richard required assistance with a substantial inventory consignment. He bestowed a farewell kiss upon me and encouraged me to have an excellent day. I proceeded to my place of employment but departed at the midday break, driving to a parcel service outlet where I printed out every single digital capture I had amassed. Hundreds of pages. Subsequently, I journeyed to an office supply retailer and acquired folders and adhesive labels. I dedicated Friday afternoon to meticulously organizing everything chronologically, by conversational thread, and by individual participant. I rendered it exhaustive. I rendered it meticulous. Then I secreted it all within the recesses of my wardrobe, a location Stuart never frequented. Friday evening, he expressed a desire to dine out with Jackson and some other mutual acquaintances. He inquired if I wished to accompany them. I demurred, citing fatigue, but encouraged him to enjoy himself. He appeared almost relieved by my refusal to join them, likely because it would afford him the liberty to discuss me without my immediate presence. He departed around 7 o'clock, and I remained in my apartment alone, ruminating on every facet of the situation. On the 9 months I had invested with this individual. On my conviction that we were cultivating an authentic connection. On my family's introduction to him and their subsequent approbation. On the recreational excursion we undertook and the impending festive season and the life I believed we were collaboratively constructing. And on the utter falsity of it all. On how every aspect constituted his exploitation of me while he clandestinely mocked me with his companions. My mobile device vibrated, indicating a message from my mother, inquiring about the status of my relationship with Stuart and whether we were still planning to attend Sunday dinner this weekend. I affirmed our attendance, for I needed to maintain the illusion of normalcy, just for a slightly extended period. Stuart returned home around midnight, slightly inebriated, recounting the evening's enjoyable escapades. He promptly succumbed to slumber in bed and commenced snoring immediately. I lay beside him, gazing at the ceiling, and a profound realization dawned upon me. I was not sorrowful, I was indignant, and I was utterly done with being benevolent regarding this situation. Monday was destined to be remarkably eventful. Update: the Sunday evening repast at my parents' abode was unequivocally agonizing. We journeyed there in my luxury German automobile, the very one Stuart commandeers at his discretion. And throughout the entire duration he exuded an air of charm and tenderness, clasping my hand, inquiring if I believed my father would wish to observe the athletic competition with him following the meal. And I merely remained seated, my thoughts consumed by that particular message wherein he had labeled me a cetacean and his insidious scheme to discard me after the Christmas period, once he had received all his desired gratuities. My mother, Virginia, answered the portal and immediately embraced Stuart as if he were her biological offspring. She had meticulously prepared a slow-cooked beef dish, recalling it was his preferred meal from our previous visit. My father was situated in the living area and rose to extend his hand to Stuart, inquiring about his professional activities at the automotive components establishment and whether his Uncle Richard was still contemplating an expansion of the enterprise. Stuart launched into an elaborate narrative concerning Richard's potential opening of a secondary branch and his own aspirations to potentially manage it someday. And my parents were utterly captivated by his account. He discoursed upon his ambition, the immense benefit of familial support, the rarity of encountering young men possessing such a commendable work ethic in the contemporary era. I yearned to emit a piercing shriek. This individual engages in part-time employment at a diminutive automotive components shop and dedicates the remainder of his temporal resources to engaging in electronic gaming on the console I procured for him, all while residing gratis in my apartment. But certainly, father, enlighten me further regarding his extraordinary industriousness. The evening meal was a form of exquisite torture. My mother persistently inquired about prospective matrimonial plans, and Stuart adopted a bashful demeanor, asserting that we were progressing judiciously, ensuring our profound readiness, and my mother simply beamed at him, perceiving him as mature and considerate. She later confided in me, when we were alone in the culinary space, that I ought to retain this individual, that men of Stuart's caliber were not frequently encountered. I very nearly dropped the dish I was holding. My younger sibling Jasper was also present, and he continually exchanged jests with Stuart pertaining to athletic pursuits, and they evinced a strong rapport. And at one juncture Jasper made a remark suggesting that Stuart was considerably more appealing than my former romantic partner from my collegiate years, and that I should unequivocally wed this individual. And Stuart emitted a chuckle and encircled me with his arm and pressed his lips against my temple. Throughout the entire duration my mobile device resided in my pocket, containing approximately 300 digital captures of him referring to me as a porcine creature. Following the meal, my father and Stuart retired to observe the athletic competition, and my mother drew me aside to assist with the dishwashing. She commenced articulating her profound happiness that I had discovered such a stable and benevolent individual, and how she could discern his genuine affection for me by the manner in which he regarded me. She declared she had never before witnessed such an intense level of contentment from me. And I simply remained standing there, attending to the dishes, contemplating the utter unreality of it all. How my entire familial unit had been deceived, precisely as I had been. How Stuart had dedicated 9 months to embodying the perfect romantic partner in my immediate presence, all while ridiculing every aspect of my being to his associates behind my back. Mother inquired if I was well, and I affirmed my satisfactory condition, attributing any perceived fatigue to my professional exertions. She noted that I had appeared somewhat stressed recently and suggested that perhaps Stuart and I ought to embark on a brief weekend excursion together, simply to unwind and rekindle our connection. She even tendered financial assistance for such a venture. I conveyed my appreciation for her thoughtfulness but assured her we were managing adequately. And she embraced me and reiterated her profound relief that I had discovered my person. My person who was meticulously planning to discard me subsequent to acquiring his Christmas presents. We departed around 8 o'clock, and Stuart was in an exceedingly buoyant mood, discoursing on his deep affection for my family and his immense fortune in possessing such welcoming prospective in-laws. Prospective in-laws. He repeatedly employed that particular phrase. And each time he uttered it, my grip on the steering mechanism tightened perceptibly. Upon our arrival home, Stuart expressed a desire for amorous intimacy, and I concocted an alibi pertaining to menstrual discomfort. And he exhibited a surprisingly gentle and understanding demeanor, procuring pain relievers and a heated compress, and cuddling with me on the settee. And that, in an inexplicable way, rendered the situation even more distressing, for this iteration of Stuart, the attentive, compassionate romantic partner, felt like the most profound falsehood of all. Monday morning I awoke to find Stuart already departed for his professional obligations. He had left a handwritten communiqué on the culinary counter, stating that his uncle required his early presence for inventory management and that he would reunite with me that evening, adorned with a minuscule heart drawn at the bottom. A heart. I fixated on that note for approximately 5 minutes, contemplating how he likely sketched that heart while mentally formulating his next message to his associates, detailing what a desperate cetacean I was. At my place of employment I found myself barely capable of concentration. My colleague Rachel repeatedly cast concerned glances in my direction, but I assured her of my well-being. During the midday repast, she cornered me in the vehicular parking area beside my automobile and directly inquired about the nature of my distress, observing my unusual demeanor for over a week. And I capitulated. I divulged every detail, about discovering the communications, about the auditory recordings, about how Stuart had been exploiting me and deriding me for months. Rachel's countenance underwent approximately 15 distinct transformations: shock, indignation, revulsion, and then she adopted an expression I can only characterize as vengeful. She inquired about my intended course of action, and I admitted my uncertainty, stating that I was still endeavoring to ascertain a resolution. She generously offered her assistance in any capacity I might require, suggesting I could reside at her dwelling if I desired to evict him, whatever my necessities dictated. I appreciated that gesture immensely, but I informed her I was not yet prepared to undertake any definitive action, that I required further deliberation. She regarded me with an expression of incredulity, yet she relented and extracted a promise from me to keep her apprised of developments. Monday evening, Stuart returned home bearing pre-prepared food from my preferred establishment. He declared that he believed I merited a special treat after exhibiting recent stress. And I remained seated there, consuming the pad thai he had defrayed the cost of with my credit card, for indeed, I had examined the banking application while he was in the lavatory and observed the transaction, while he recounted the events of his day as if nothing was amiss. He informed me that his Uncle Richard was exceedingly impressed with his recent professional contributions and might entrust him with augmented responsibilities, that he was contemplating soliciting a salary increment, that circumstances were indeed improving for us, as if we constituted a unified entity, as if he were not actively planning to abandon me in 2 months' time. On Tuesday I was compelled to attend the Department of Motor Vehicles, as my driving authorization was nearing its expiration and necessitated renewal. I was seated in those uncomfortable plastic chairs, awaiting the announcement of my assigned number, when I observed Jackson, Stuart's closest confidant. Jackson, the individual who had participated in that group communication, referring to me as a cetacean. He was present to renew his vehicle registration or some similar administrative task, and upon noticing me he approached with a broad, amiable grin. He inquired about my well-being, mentioning that Stuart had communicated our visit to my parents' residence for supper, and it sounded agreeable. He maintained such an ordinary and congenial demeanor, and an overwhelming urge to strike him surged within me, but instead I reciprocated his smile and engaged in trivial conversation about the perpetual delays at the DMV and its inherent annoyance. And Jackson chuckled and concurred. And then he articulated something that caused my blood to reach a boiling point. He declared that Stuart was fortunate to possess such a sweet and understanding companion, asserting that his previous romantic partner had been excessively demanding and that it was pleasant to observe him with someone more relaxed, implicitly meaning more susceptible to manipulation, allowing him to evade accountability for his every transgression. On Wednesday, my mother transmitted a message, inquiring if I desired to accompany her on a Christmas shopping excursion on Saturday. She proposed that we could dedicate the entire day to it, visiting the retail complex, partaking of a midday meal, perhaps acquiring some decorative items for my apartment since Stuart would presumably be spending Christmas with us this year. She inquired if I had yet discussed his desired gifts. I fixated on that text message for an extended period, for I knew Stuart possessed a comprehensive wish list on his mobile device. A strategically curated compendium of expensive articles he intended to manipulate me into purchasing before ultimately discarding me. A specialized gaming chair, wireless audio devices, a sophisticated timepiece, designer athletic footwear. I replied via text message, affirming that Saturday shopping sounded excellent and that I would manage Stuart's gift situation. Wednesday evening, Stuart inquired if I could provide him with some assistance. He accessed a digital platform showcasing gaming chairs on my portable computer and commenced displaying various models, elaborating on how his current seating arrangement was causing him spinal discomfort and how significantly his concentration could improve with appropriate lumbar support. He made specific mention of a particular chair that was available at a reduced price, an exceptionally advantageous offer, typically costing around $400, but now marked down to $300. This was it. This was the manipulative tactic I had observed within his confidential notes. The calculated mention of the sale to imbue it with the appearance of a bargain. The health-related angle to render it seem indispensable. The nonchalant manner in which he introduced the subject, as if it had merely spontaneously occurred to him. I feigned compliance, posing inquiries about features, nodding in agreement as he elucidated why this particular chair surpassed others, observing his countenance illuminate, convinced that his scheme was flawlessly unfolding. Then he casually remarked that his natal day was not until January, but Christmas presents were also entirely acceptable. And he would be profoundly appreciative if I could assist him in acquiring such an item, asserting that he would somehow reciprocate my generosity. Reciprocate my generosity with what precisely? With additional months of labeling me a cetacean? With further recordings transmitted to his associates for their amusement? I informed him I would consider it, and he bestowed a kiss upon me and proclaimed me the finest, returning to his electronic game, looking exceedingly satisfied with himself. On Thursday, I proceeded to a large discount retailer after concluding my professional duties, as I required provisions and also simply felt the necessity to temporarily vacate my apartment. I was traversing the aisles of the establishment when I discerned someone uttering my appellation. I pivoted and discovered it was Brenda, Stuart's maternal figure. She was present to acquire confectionery for the autumnal holiday, even though the holiday itself had already transpired. She explained it was on clearance and she enjoyed stockpiling it. She enveloped me in a warm embrace and commenced discoursing on the exceptional quality of the preceding week's evening meal, how much she relished becoming better acquainted with me, how she could discern I exerted such a positive influence on Stuart. A positive influence because apparently prior to my arrival he was what? Even more deplorable. Brenda interlinked her arm with mine and walked alongside me through the store, engaging in desultory conversation. She mentioned that Stuart had been discussing the possibility of perusing engagement rings in the near future, that he had solicited her opinion on various styles. She articulated this with a knowing smile, as if we were sharing a confidential secret. My stomach plummeted, for Stuart had made no mention of engagement rings to me whatsoever, which implied either he was prevaricating to his mother to maintain appearances, or this constituted a component of his protracted deception. To keep everyone convinced we were progressing towards matrimony, so no one would question his continued rent-free residency with me. Brenda inquired if I harbored any preferences for ring styles, if Stuart had yet shown me any options. I fabricated a response concerning my predilection for understated designs, classic aesthetics, expressing a disinclination for anything overly ostentatious. She nodded in agreement and affirmed Stuart's discerning taste, that whatever he selected would be exquisite. We completed our purchases concurrently, and Brenda embraced me farewell in the vehicular parking area, instructing me to care for her son. Her son, who was actively defrauding me and plotting to discard me. I remained seated in my automobile for approximately 20 minutes after her departure, simply processing the revelations. Stuart's mother held me in high regard. My family adored him. Everyone believed we constituted this impeccable couple progressing towards matrimony, and it was all predicated on falsehoods. Thursday evening, Stuart's mobile device persistently vibrated throughout our evening meal. He repeatedly checked it, smirking at something he observed. And finally, I inquired about the identity of his correspondent. He stated, merely the group communication, the fellows being their usual idiotic selves. Then he positioned his phone face down and inquired about my day. I recounted my fortuitous encounter with his mother at the large discount retailer. His countenance brightened and he inquired about her statements, if she had mentioned anything regarding the ensuing month when his aunt was hosting the autumnal feast. I replied negatively, merely trivial conversation. She appeared pleased to see me. Stuart offered a smile and declared that his entire familial unit held me in high esteem. That his mother had repeatedly conveyed her contentment with our shared relationship. That I was precisely the type of individual he ought to settle down with, while he meticulously planned my abandonment. Following the evening meal, I informed Stuart that I needed to attend to some professional tasks on my portable computer. Instead, I accessed his tablet device that he had inadvertently left on the low table. I had been obsessively scrutinizing it now, searching for novel communications, new corroborating evidence, novel methods through which he was ridiculing me. There was a fresh group communication from Tuesday evening. Jackson had transmitted a photographic image from the Department of Motor Vehicles, an image of me seated in those plastic chairs, awaiting the recitation of my assigned number. He had surreptitiously photographed me and dispatched it with the accompanying caption, "Look who I ran into LOL." Stuart had responded. Did she appear at all suspicious? Jackson asserted. Nah, she's utterly oblivious. We conversed and everything was perfectly normal. Josiah interjected. Brother, how does she not yet comprehend? And Stuart replied, because she is desperate and perceives what she desires to perceive. Furthermore, I exercise caution. She is not intelligent enough to detect anything. Not intelligent enough. Not intelligent enough. An overwhelming urge to hurl the tablet across the room consumed me. Instead, I meticulously captured digital images, as had been my consistent practice, systematically preserving every novel piece of incriminating evidence. The photographic image Jackson had taken of me. Stuart's inquiry regarding my apparent suspicion. All of them deriving amusement from my perceived cluelessness. There was more. A new auditory memorandum from Wednesday. Stuart whispering to Jackson via telephone while I was engaged in showering. I could discern him articulating his successful planting of the seed regarding the gaming chair, that I would unequivocally procure it, that his Christmas acquisitions were destined to be magnificent. Jackson chuckled and declared Stuart a mastermind. A mastermind for manipulating his romantic partner. I transmitted everything to my own device and expunged the historical record. Then I closed the tablet and returned to the sleeping chamber where Stuart was already reclined in bed, scrolling through his mobile device. He glanced upwards upon my entrance and patted the mattress beside him, inviting me to join him in an embrace. Friday morning, Stuart inquired if I had further contemplated the acquisition of the gaming chair. He posited that he genuinely required it for his spinal well-being, asserting that he had been experiencing discomfort from assuming an awkward posture while engaging in electronic gaming. He presented me with an expression of feigned innocence, like a pleading canine, and I could precisely discern his machinations, the manipulation, the counterfeit vulnerability, the expectation that I would capitulate and acquire it. I informed him I needed to deliberate further, emphasizing the substantial financial outlay involved. He appeared disheartened but affirmed his understanding, stating he did not wish to exert pressure upon me. Then he mentioned that if I was unable to procure the chair, perhaps the wireless audio devices would be more financially accessible, that he had been desirous of upgrading his antiquated headphones, the very wireless audio devices that were also prominently featured on his strategic manipulation roster. At my place of employment, Rachel inquired if I had yet reached a decision regarding my course of action. I informed her negatively, stating that I was still processing every detail. She appeared exasperated and asserted that I needed to cease processing and commence acting, that each day I procrastinated was another day he was exploiting me. And she was accurate. I knew she was accurate. But something within me craved further evidence. Needed to witness precisely the extent of his deception. Needed to apprehend him in as many falsehoods as conceivably possible before I ignited the entire explosive situation. Friday evening, Stuart expressed a desire to socialize with Jackson and their male acquaintances. I assented, instructing him to enjoy himself. He inquired if I was absolutely certain I did not wish to accompany them, and I reiterated my fatigue, stating I would likely merely observe television and retire early. He departed around 7 o'clock, and I immediately seized his tablet device. I needed to ascertain what he would communicate about me when he was in the company of his associates, if he would once again surreptitiously record me, if there would be further instances of derision. But what I discovered was even more egregious. There was a novel conversation in a distinct communication thread, solely between Stuart and an individual named Bethany. And the messages were overtly amorous. Excessively amorous. Bethany was the female from the fitness facility he had alluded to, the one he was planning to court after severing ties with me. They had been engaged in discussions for several weeks since mid-October. She had transmitted photographic images of herself engaged in physical exertion. He had offered compliments. They had formulated plans to rendezvous once his situation was handled. She had inquired about the projected timeline, and he had responded, soon. Just awaiting the opportune moment. Bethany inquired if his current romantic partner harbored any suspicions, and Stuart asserted negatively, stating that I was utterly oblivious, that he had every aspect under meticulous control. She transmitted a photographic image of herself attired in workout apparel with the accompanying caption, "Cannot wait for you to be unencumbered so we can finally embark on proper outings." And Stuart responded with fiery emojis and affirmed, "Soon, my dear. I pledge it. Simply must endure this until after the festive season." He was employing terms of endearment with another female while residing in my apartment. While I defrayed every expense, while he meticulously plotted to extract Christmas presents from me before discarding me for her. I captured digital images of every communication with Bethany. Every amorous message, every photographic image she had transmitted, every instance wherein he had labeled me clueless or discussed his situation that needed to be handled. There were dozens of messages. They had been engaged in continuous communication, formulating plans for after he abandoned me, discussing their initial legitimate rendezvous. Him promising her it would be soon. I remained seated on my settee, surrounded by incontrovertible evidence of my romantic partner's perfidy. And a profound realization struck me. This was no longer solely about his exploitation of me for financial gain. This constituted his active emotional infidelity, if not yet physical, all while rendering me an imbecile in the eyes of everyone. Monday, I was going to terminate this. But I was going to execute it in my own distinctive manner. And Stuart was going to comprehend that the clueless cetacean he had been defrauding for 9 months possessed considerably more intellect than he had imagined. Rachel was correct. It was time to cease processing and commence acting. Last update. Okay, so I am presently composing this, and I am still experiencing such an intense surge of adrenaline that I am barely capable of typing coherently, and I feel an imperative need to divulge every detail, for my actions were absolutely audacious, yet simultaneously the most empowering experience I have ever undertaken in my existence, and I harbor not a single iota of remorse. Following my preceding update, a multitude of you posited that I needed to confront Stuart immediately. Simply eject him and conclude the matter. And I was indeed planning to. I genuinely was. But then, on Saturday evening, subsequent to a shopping excursion with my maternal figure, an idea materialized within my consciousness. A brilliant, vindictive, absolutely impeccable idea. The festive season of Christmas was a mere 3 weeks away. Stuart was meticulously planning to exploit me throughout the holidays and then discard me. He possessed his strategic manipulation roster at the ready, his egress strategy meticulously formulated, his new romantic interest, Bethany, patiently awaiting in the wings. Consequently, I resolved to permit him to believe he was prevailing. To allow him to entertain the notion that his scheme was flawlessly unfolding, and then to utterly dismantle him in the most spectacular manner conceivable. Sunday, I conducted myself with complete normalcy, engaging in affectionate gestures with Stuart on the settee, responding with laughter to his jests, pretending that every aspect was entirely satisfactory. He harbored no awareness that I had revealed the digital captures to my mother. No awareness that I had shed tears in the communal dining area of the retail complex. He simply believed we were experiencing a pleasant, tranquil weekend. Monday, I initiated telephonic contact with my sibling Jasper from my place of employment. I divulged every detail to him. Every single detail. I displayed the digital captures, the auditory recordings, the communications with Bethany, Stuart's Christmas manipulation roster. Jasper was incandescent with rage.